Today in this video, I'm going to talk about regrets. And the reason why is because often when we're dealt with a card of an illness, whether that be serious or not, or death and dying, whether it's for a loved one, it's for yourself, we often start to do kind of a little bit of a life review and really start thinking about how we have spent our time. We can't help but do this. So today we're going to talk about regrets. So let's get into it. It's so common to go through so many types of emotions and experiences when we're dealing with illness and death. And I know I've said it before in other videos about, fear and anger and all this type of stuff, but it is important to really normalize as good as we can normalize and use that word. But it's really important to normalize these experiences, these emotions for everybody because these are very real. And sometimes we think that we should be feeling a certain way or should try to be more positive. And I am all for, making the most of a situation and incorporating positivity, gratitude, all that good stuff into these moments, even though they may be challenging. But it's really critical that we take time to acknowledge and validate these other experiences, these other emotions. And it doesn't mean emotions like fear, having regrets, having anger, guilt, having grief, all these things. It doesn't mean that they have to own us every single moment of every single day, but we can feel these things and also bring in things like gratitude, bring in things like some hope, things like that. So I just always kind of want to continue to preface the normalcy, the okayness, however you want to call it, and how really it's important to accept all these types of basically life and human type of emotions and experiences as we go through illness and end of life. With reference to regrets, this is such a common thing. And what's so interesting, one of the things that I really noticed was regrets really seem to pop up when somebody gets ill and or when someone's dealing with death and dying. And it is so interesting how the moment that we start to encounter our own morality is when we actually start to look into how we've spent our time before and our regrets. So what I'd like to say before we continue is, if you're at a point in your life where maybe you aren't maybe quite there to dealing with things like a serious illness or death or illness. I don't want to just say serious. Any kind of illness is serious enough. To maybe use this as an opportunity to either really make the most of your moments, especially with your loved ones, with yourself, with the things that you have that maybe you don't always appreciate. And that can look different for everybody, but that is important because when it's not until we get to a point where we could possibly lose it all, do we start to actually really start to appreciate it. So I know that seems kind of obvious, but it is so important because the feelings of regret are so real and so deep. So the other thing I want to say as we continue this conversation or this video on regrets is you may hear some people say, I've got no regrets at all. And good for them. But the one thing I want to say is to that is if you have no regrets, the one thing I want to say is consider whether or not you're really have reflected enough and maybe taken the opportunity to grow, because certainly regrets are a very normal thing, particularly I think for almost all, everybody, especially people who have made mistakes, especially people who have learned from certain situations where situations have brought them to certain things and maybe they see how they could have done things differently. This is different than being grateful for having whatever opportunity happened to them and that opportunity or that experience bringing them some sort of lesson, some sort of personal growth, the ability to, even though they experienced, say, for example, not performing well at work deliberately and getting fired, maybe that led to them learning that, maybe they want to start to value what they're contributing to the world, et cetera, et cetera. So when I hear people say that they have no regrets, I do wonder if it's fully sincere. You can have regrets. By all means, I have regrets. I have regrets with how I lived a majority of my life for my work and for the people for whom I worked, and literally killed myself to the point where the last several years of my life were spent very ill, hundreds of thousands of dollars now on medical treatments, including other functional treatments and medications and supplements and doctor's visits and procedures and all that kind of stuff. I have regrets. Oh my God, I have regrets. But I do take a moment to also realize that there was some good that came out of it. And for me, it was learning how to not prioritize everybody else over me. And also for me for doing things that I actually enjoy and spending my time enjoying it, because, I've been told that my life could be cut short. I was told many other things, in terms about death and dying and all that kind of stuff, especially if I didn't change drastically and all this kind of stuff. So all of that was very good. I also really started to appreciate my relationships and eventually decided to get married, but I'm so happy that I did. So all that kind of stuff. So it is normal to have regrets, totally normal to have regrets, and still think that you got something out of the situation that you experienced. Okay, I certainly did, and I'm certainly here, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about it and kind of the lessons learned, because goodness knows I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through, and I understand that things could be a lot worse as well. We're dealing with at a time where, there are wars going on and people are being killed, and they don't even have just their basic safety intact. And for people who have their safety intact and they can deal with things like, taking care of their physical health or emotional health or mental health, it's almost now like a luxury, in certain cases of the world. So this is why we talk about all this stuff, because there is so much meaning behind it, and there's so much value behind it, and there's so much that we can glean from it. And back to regrets, there are really important things to just note. Number one, you may never get over your regrets, and you may never fully forgive yourself for the regrets that you have. And while I think, it's so nice to just imagine that, being able to forgive actually frees you, whether it's another person or yourself, there have been different thoughts on that, in terms of forgiveness and whether that other person really deserves to be forgiven. This is comes from I forget her name, but she talks about narcissists and all that kind of stuff. Is this, I believe, a psychologist and specializes in that. But I just think, for this purpose, that it is okay, and for what it's worth, I'm giving you permission to maybe know that you may not ever forget and ever really forgive yourself for those regrets, and you may not ever really release them. And it doesn't mean that you can't heal and continue to heal, and it doesn't mean that you can't continue to move forward in life. If you're deciding to move forward in life and continue to grow from the situation, make the most out of it especially, then you're actually doing a really awesome job. There are people that hang on to things and they do the same thing every single day. They live the same way every single day, thinking the same thing every single day, and not open to any other way of being or thinking, or feeling. And if you are watching this, then you are most likely trying to change your trajectory. So regrets are a very real thing. Feeling them and having them is totally real, totally normal, while you still get something out of that situation for which you have regret. How would you actually get rid of them? It's so different for everybody, because it's so individual to the person. The important thing that you've heard me say, especially with fear, anger, all those other types of end-of-life experiences, is to recognize it, validate it, and allow yourself to feel it. Allow yourself to feel the regret, because what the hurtful thing that you can do in these types of situations where you're, experiencing feelings that you don't like and thoughts that you don't like, is to try to get rid of them, or people try to push them down, but then they also try to get rid of them. And it's kind of unrealistic to try to get rid of them, because they're there. It's happening inside of you. So it's not really going to just disappear and dissipate. So by allowing yourself to feel it, taking time to really delve into it, and I always say, especially when it comes to anything related to a trauma-like experience or a traumatic experience or anything that was really especially feeling threatening to you, you need to do this with a qualified professional. Or at least don't do this by yourself, because you really need to have the appropriate escort there with you to move through these and process through these emotions, okay? So with regret, though, you could be, just banging your head against the wall about, gosh, I should have said something when that woman said that nasty thing to that other person, when I was walking by the other day, and I just didn't, because I was tired and I just didn't feel like getting in the middle of somebody's business. And, she said something just really awful, and I just felt like I should have said something, and now I'm just kicking myself for it. And that's one example of, a ton. And what you'll have to do there is validate that feeling, really, really validate it, and just allow yourself to feel it. You can, as to move forward, you can do some things like, look at the best case scenario and really what you'd want to do the next time should you run into that situation. So really thinking about, I learned from this lesson. That's a really cool thing. I regret that I didn't act on it, but oh my gosh, did I really learn that never again am I going to allow somebody to treat somebody with such disrespect, etc. And, think about, okay, I learned, I have regrets for not doing what I wanted to do. I learned from it. How would I act if the situation happened again? So walk through that in your brain. You're walking, down the street, you're encountering that. What would you say? How would you interact with these people? How would you, maintain your cool while being compassionate and, trying to make sure that that person who was, being insulted or spoke to in a very demeaning way, how would you support them? And make it something that will drive you and motivate you to do what feels good to you, what feels better to you in the future. Okay? So use that. You can use this to mobilize yourself, and that is a really good thing. You can still feel the regret. You can still feel like, oh, I just wish. And, if it's really consuming you, then take, 5 minutes every day. You don't want to, spend the whole day, but give yourself dedicated time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I probably wouldn't do more than that, but do what's right for you. Set a timer and just allow yourself to feel bad for what you did or didn't do, and allow yourself to just process it. Again, if it's anything related to anything that was threatening to you or potentially threatening to you, trauma especially, you must work with a qualified professional, because that's not what we're talking about here, okay? And that is out of the scope. So take that dedicated time every single day and, and allow yourself to then hopefully maybe wean from every day to maybe a few days a week, etc. And that'll be your dedicated time where you just, and if you want to beat yourself up about it, go ahead. And then when you're done, when that alarm goes down, okay, then you think about, okay, now I'm ready to move on. I've learned from my lesson. I'm going to go out there in the world today, or maybe I'm working from home today. My interactions are going to be especially patient. I'm going to be very thoughtful, whatever it is that is going to speak to your lessons learned and your takeaways, if you will, from that experience for which you have regret. And if you decide that you really want to forgive yourself, then that is something that, truthfully, I haven't been able to do as well. I have not fully forgiven myself for putting so many people in front of me and my well-being, on the back burner. And I know for me and from what my people with whom I've worked and talked about this issue specifically, it is kind of the same thing as to what I'm saying. What I recommended a couple minutes ago is something that I think has helped. And then, when I'm going back and when I'm dipping back into it, I recognize that, yep, I can feel that way, but I can also take the time to know that, yeah, even though I really regret and I haven't really forgiven myself, it's reminding me right now in this very moment that I feel like I need rest, so I'm going to go ahead and rest, for example. Or even though so-and-so invited me to this thing tonight and I'm just not up for it, I physically feel like I can't, I don't have the reserves, I just don't have the emotional whatever right now. I just had a procedure done, and so I just need to really rest. And then I'm just going to say, without feeling the guilt, that, this is what I need. I'm so sorry. I wish I could make it. I'll make it up to you. Let's maybe in the next couple of weeks, let's get together for coffee or whatever. I think people are getting a little bit more and more accepting of people setting some boundaries, people, being a little bit more honest about what they can and can't do. I think that's a much more accepted thing. Definitely not, I think, in my time. I think you, especially with work, it was just like you gave work everything and you never complained. You just kept your head down. You just kept taking more and more and more and more and more. I think people are a lot smarter now. And, people are also criticizing this generation, saying that they're not strong. And I don't know. I don't know. I rather praise people for having the balance in their life, because it's just not worth losing yourself and losing your health over a job that, is going to benefit somebody else. And then you walk away with having to deal with a bunch of illnesses and payments to medical bills and all that kind of stuff. I always gave 150% of myself every single day, every single moment, to my work and other people. And so maybe that's a little different. I don't know. Anyway, the other thing with regret, so we talked about really acknowledging it, and at the same time, when you really feel stuck, giving yourself a dedicated time to really feel the regret, and then using that to mobilize you and take the lessons learned from it, apply it to that day to move forward, whatever it may be. And if you need to do something even more physical, writing about it is something that's actually physical, especially if you're writing, or even if you're typing. If you're doing something physical, sometimes that kind of helps feel like you're processing it a little bit more versus just thinking about it. Also getting into your body and walking or doing something physical while you're thinking about it. It's a great thing, especially if you need to go and do a hard workout, all those types of things. So incorporating something physical is also not only that to help process it, but it also gets you out of the immediacy of this right here and gets you into your body, feeling your body, and feels like you're just kind of moving through that anger that's associated with it, the regret you have, all that type of stuff. So those are just a few little things. I always like to try to keep these under a half hour, but just a quick little recap. Acknowledgement is so important. Feeling it is so important. Dedicating time to feeling your regrets is so important. Knowing that you can feel regret and feel other feelings that are comforting feelings, more positive feelings are good. So you can certainly have regret for whatever it was in your life while still being grateful, for the lessons learned, being happy that you at least, came out, unscathed, and you were able to move forward with your life and work on this and process it. Dedicate time, like we said, to feeling the regret and make it, incremental and dedicated time. Make sure there's an endpoint, and then take your lesson learned and apply it in a certain way once a day or once a week, however that works for you. If you're still trying to process it, getting into a physical type of action, like physically writing it through, is really helpful. And then if you're not really into that, getting into your body, like going for a walk, going for a run. You'll notice that I just changed my clothing and everything now, because when I was editing this video, the audio for some reason just stopped. So I was just finishing up my point about one of the last things that you can do to really help process and kind of also manage these feelings that can seem overwhelming, especially around regret. Lastly is getting into your body, doing something physical. We did talk about writing and also doing actually something physical, whatever you can do physically for your body, whether you're limited or not, whether it's something as simple as breathing, or, doing some deep breathing exercises, or, if you're able to walk, run, work out, whatever it may be. What that does is, again, it gets us out of here for a moment and gets us into our body. And also, when we are feeling whatever feelings we're feeling, we can actually kind of allow them to run through us a little bit more and energize, the physical movement that we're partaking in. So anyway, that was it for this video. Please let me know what questions you have, if you need me to expand on any other, items that we covered here. certainly on anything else. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Abigail, here to normalize conversations and education about death and dying so we die better at end of life, and really using the valuable tool that death is to create more meaning and value in our lives day to day. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining.